Special forces killed an 1,100-pound giant in Afghanistan. To be 1,100 pounds, you got to be massive, dude.
Well, I've heard a lot of stories
Massive.
about giants in Afghanistan, and I find that I talk about a lot of different topics.
How did they?
I talk about a
How?
lot of UFO stuff, and I say some things that I know
Let
are
me move.
nothing makes me more nervous than talking about giants, specifically the Kandahar giant.
Why is he nervous about
And
talking about
I was in
giants? I
Kandahar
wonder
in
if
Afghanistan.
giants, like, obviously there's giant people in the world. There's 8 foot. There's been recorded 8 foot, close to 9 foot humans. So giants being like 10, 12 foot wouldn't be like too crazy. But if you're talking about somebody who's 25 foot tall, brother,
The Kandahar giant.
that's almost up there with alien
This
conspiracy. You know what
story
I mean?
has grown into a mythology over the years. Um, Years ago, I was working with a gentleman named Steve Quayle, and we started a production company called Gen 6 Productions. And we were making documentary films mainly about giants, mainly on the topic of giants.
Make sure y'all can
Giants
hear
as
this.
like referred to in the Bible, in
Yeah,
ancient
just
history, the Smithsonian giants.
that's right, biblical and historical accounts of
Okay.
giants. So I was traveling around the world investigating giants, and Steve is known for his
But like,
investigations
what do
into
you
giants.
do? What do you do? If you run into a giant, you're just dead. You're just dead, brother. If you run into a giant, you are chopped, gang. It is over.
And he got a phone call
Their hands are bigger than
from
you.
an elderly woman who told him, "You need to talk to my son. My son has a story he needs to tell you." And she had to convince her son to talk to Steve, and ultimately he did. And he was active duty. He was a C-130 pilot, active duty. He actually went on coast to coast with Steve. They went on coast to coast together, and he related his story, I believe, with George Norrie, him, Steve, and George. And then later on, we flew him into Bozeman, Montana to
Who
put
do
him
you
in our
think he's getting
documentary
this
film
news
that we
from,
did.
though? It's got to be special forces. Like, that's the only people I could think that could deal with something like a giant or alien or anything. It's got to be special forces, highly, military. They probably don't even want to talk about this
We
shit
were
for real.
making.
They're scared.
And he did not, he wanted to be filmed in silhouette. He did not want his face out there, even though he knew that they're going to be able to mark him just by his voice. So he
Well,
flies into
when they say
Bozeman.
that, why not just scramble the voice? Why just keep the voice the same? Just scramble the voice. It's harder to hear
We
who
meet
it
with
actually
him.
is.
He shows us his credentials. He was active duty C-130. And then he told us the following story, among many other things that he told us. He said back in 2005, he was deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq running missions as a C-130 cargo pilot. And oftentimes they would have him fly into Bagram Airfield. And these were routine missions. And so
I
one of these
mean,
missions, he's flying into Bagram. But this time when he landed, he was met, as soon as he deplaned, he was met on the tarmac by some individuals that he describes as the babysitters. He calls them the babysitters. He thinks they were either
so he's
Army
saying there's
intelligence or
people that
air.
watch over these giants. Like there's people that watch over the giants to make sure, like they're what? They're hidden or like you can't hide somebody that big. That's the thing. There's no way to hide
Force
somebody that
intelligence
big.
guys, and they didn't tell him. But this was different because when he disembarked, they told him no photos, no mention of this ever. This never happened. So he knew that whatever was about to happen was top secret. And he had flown classified missions before, usually retrieving Taliban guys, what he described as high valued assets. But this was different because there were intelligence guys on the tarmac waiting for something. And it turns out what they were waiting for was the cargo that was being delivered on a forklift to the C-130. And the pilot says that the first thing that struck him as this cargo was moving toward him and his crew was the odor. He said it smelled like this, like musk, BO, and death, and it was extremely pungent. And when the cargo arrived,
They killed the
it was
giant.
on
They kill it.
an air cargo pallet, which is 7x9, and he could see that there was a person on the pallet in the fetal position. And this individual was so large that his hands and his feet and part of his head were hanging off the pallet.
Jesus Christ.
And
Giant must have been
He
massive.
and his loadmaster, and there were some Marines who accompanied the pellet, who accompanied this cargo. They were actually putting their feet up to this guy's feet, this dead giant's feet.
Okay, so they killed it. That's what it
And
had to be
seeing
the
how
odor.
small
There's
their
no way
feet were compared
he
to his.
stunk that bad.
Now, the giant had red hair. He had 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. His feet were wrapped in like a crude canvas foot wrapping. And he was solid as a rock. Again, most of his body was covered by a tarp, but the pilot and the guys around him were hitting him with their fists. And he came up to about their midsection, laying in the fetal position. And the pilot told me he was solid as a rock, this guy. And he asked the Marines, what happened? Where did this guy come from? And they told him that they had heard.
He's from
that there was a team that
Afghanistan?
was out in Afghanistan that was looking for Taliban or something. And they came upon a cave because there was a nearby village, and the villagers were bringing food and other artifacts to the mouth of this cave. And so they thought that they're aiding and abetting the Taliban. So they went into the cave, and rather than encountering the Taliban, what they found was this enormous humanoid who killed them all.
Oh,
And then
fuck. The giant just murked the whole team. You gotta think, man, they got guns, all types of shit. You think a bullet? You think our version of what a bullet is hurts a giant that big? He's talking about he's hanging off the pallet of a cargo ship. Not a cargo ship. It would be like a smaller form, but he's hanging off the pallet. I would assume if you're picking up a giant, that ain't no small pallet. It ain't no cargo ship size pallet, but it definitely ain't a small pallet. And I don't think a bullet, unless you hit him upside the head with it, is really going to hurt him for a long period of time. That's you got to think. A giant would be like ×5 of a normal person in thickness, muscle size, the whole nine.
according to these soldiers, they deployed another team to go look for that team. And when they found the cave, they found the traces of that other team. They were ready. They were prepared. And they were able to kill the giant.
Oh.
In fact, the soldiers told the pilot that the giant was eating on members of the team who he had.
Okay, that's okay. That's horrifying. Imagine you go in on a trip. That's why I gotta give it to these U.S. people, soldiers and stuff like that. Imagine you go into a cave that the start of the people that went in the first time are slaughtered, and the thing that slaughtered them is eating them as you go in, bro. That's terrifying.
But these new guys, they took him down.
That's
And
terrifying.
then they had a transport helicopter come in and airlift him to Bagram.
Did you ever try to find records of who was there and casualties that were reported, deaths that were reported?
It's very difficult. The Pentagon
Because it's hush
actually
hush,
released
chat.
a statement
It's
some
hush
years
hush.
ago, which was
That's
bizarre.
why they don't release the depths.
Basically saying, and paraphrasing, the Kandahar giant incident never happened. There was never a giant that was killed in Afghanistan.
The
and so
Pentagon.
forth. Yeah, it was a representative. It was like a spokesman from the Pentagon or
But
something. or-
why? You gotta think. You gotta think to yourself. Why would they come out and say this all this time later? After all this happened, all this conspiracy, then you come out and say this. Like I don't know, man. It's very sus. Very
Pentagon.
sus.
Is this available online?
Yeah, they actually felt the need to debunk this.
That's hilarious.
Now,
that gets me sketchy.
well, I believed the pilot because he was a very credible guy. He didn't want his name out there. He didn't want fame or notoriety. He was very nervous. He thought there's a good chance that they're going to recognize me by my voice. He was on Coast to Coast AM, and then he's on in our documentary. There's a good chance I'm going to get recognized, and there's going to be some reprisal. He was nervous. Now, they weighed the giant before they loaded him on the C-130 because they have to load everything that goes onto the C-130. The loadmaster weighed him. He weighed 1,100 pounds.
Jesus.
And they estimated
Christ.
his height at 10
Like
to
I
12
weigh,
feet tall.
I weigh like 205, 190 around that range. Imagine adding 5 times that to my weight and height. Oh my God.
And so they loaded him onto the C-130, and then they flew him to Qatar. And then they unloaded the cargo in Qatar. And our pilot told me he heard through the grapevine that the body ended up at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He said, I don't know. That's just what I heard. So this is a firsthand account from the C-130 pilot who flew the body himself
Who was actually there?
from Bagram Airfield to Qatar.
Why does all the weird shit go to Wright-Patterson?
That's a good question.
Because that's where the weird shit goes.
Wright-Patterson used to have the Blue Room. I don't know if they still have it, but they used to have a room there called the Blue Room where they had all of the alien artifacts that had been recovered and that they were studying. And,
Yeah, think how cool it would be to be a researcher or like working over there. You get to deal with shit nobody even knows is real, or the government just has no clue what it is at all, or like giant shit like that. It's got to be a cool ass job to have in general.
completely off limits to anybody except for people who had access, the very few who had access. And but the Kandahar Giant, that story. A colleague of mine, L.A. Marsuli, he had another guy come to him, a different guy. We interviewed the pilot, Steve and I. L.A. had another guy come to him that was, I can't remember the details. He was a special forces guy. He had firsthand knowledge of the event as well. And we're not sure if it's the same one or a different one. If there was just one incident with the Giants, or if there were multiple incidents. Now, years later, this would be just a couple of years ago, because we published that film, I think, back in 2016. But just a couple of years ago, and I do have to be very careful here, I ran into a gentleman who was very high up, let's say, in the operations happening out there during the Iraq War and in Afghanistan. And this individual he'd flown a lot of missions, and he was a commander. And I asked him, we were having a casual conversation.
Ooh, my neck hurts.
He starts to walk away, and I said, hey, you were in flying missions in Afghanistan. I said, have you ever heard about the Kandahar Giant? And his wife was standing next to me, and he's sort of walking away. He turns around. The blood rushes out of his face, and he literally goes like this to me, points to his phone. And his wife whispers, he can't talk about that. So later on, I was able to, we agreed to meet it later on, and in a very controlled environment. And he related a story to me that's the most wild story I've ever heard in my life. And I'm sorry, I can't relay it.
Okay, he can't relay the
I love
fucking.
this guy.
Okay, he can't relay the craziest story he ever heard in his life. All right.
It's not the Giant of Kandahar. It's the Giants of Kandahar. There's more than one. The military has known about it. And aside from him, I talked to other soldiers who've also had knowledge of the specific incident that I cited earlier, but then also in general the Giants.
There's multiple of these motherfuckers. I mean,
And
that would make sense
I
for
have a
them to
friend
be
of mine
alive, of
who,
course. Can't just spawn out of
I
nowhere.
met some years ago. Actually, I was with Lou Elizondo at Lou's Bar in Wyoming, and there was a friend of Lou's who's now a friend of mine there, and we were talking about the Kandahar Giant. I was just telling him the story I told you, and he just couldn't believe it. He thought, this is nuts. This is crazy. And I said, okay, do something for me. Next time you're talking to somebody in government or in the military who you think maybe might know something about this, bring it up. See what happens. So he called me one day and he said, Tim, you're not going to believe it. He said, I was talking to, I have to be very careful here too. He said, I was talking to a certain individual who works for a senator. He's a staffer. I believe he's a chief of staff for the senator.
This is nuts,
Or at the very
dude. This
least
is
advisor.
nuts. I don't know if y'all
And
seen
he's
this
got
or
a
not.
military
This is
background.
nuts.
Special Forces. And he said, I was sitting there, we're really good friends. He said, we're having a casual conversation, as we always do. And just in the midst of this conversation, I said, hey, what do you know about the Kandahar Giant? And he said his face completely contorted. And they were no longer just being happy and laughing. He became very stern. And he said, what have you gotten yourself into? What are you looking into? He said, you need to be really careful. And he wouldn't tell him anything else.
That's
That's the
nutty.
kind of reaction that I get and others get whenever we try and get information on this story.
Let me know what y'all think about this story. I think this is all crazy. A 1,100-pound giant. Like, I'm not saying that it couldn't be true. There's a lot of crazy things in this world that are unexplored. But a giant that would be insane. But like I said, it wouldn't be too far from the truth because we've already had people in history grow to 9 foot tall. I don't think they're different creatures. I think they're taller human beings is what I'm saying. But let me know how y'all feel. And until the next video, which y'all should go watch the other video after this, hit the like button, hit the sub button. It's been your boy Nick, and I'm out, man.